Welcome to Sinister Memory. If you're new here, subscribe now and let us know in the comments where you're listening to this story. Let's get to today's story. The autumn of 1844 brought an unusual addition to the secluded St. Catherine's Convent in the remote hills of northern Massachusetts. Sister Margaret arrived on a rain-soaked October evening, her pale hands clutching a worn leather satchel that contained the tools of an artist whose talent would soon transform the convent's sacred spaces into galleries of unspeakable horror. Mother Superior Agnes welcomed the newcomer with the cautious optimism reserved for those seeking refuge from worldly sins, unaware that she was admitting a soul whose darkness would soon manifest in ways that defied both religious understanding and human comprehension. Sister Margaret's background remained deliberately obscured, her past shrouded in the kind of mystery that the Church often preferred not to investigate too closely. The documents accompanying her transfer from a European monastery spoke vaguely of artistic gifts and spiritual struggles that required the isolation and contemplative environment that St. Catherine's could provide. Mother Superior Agnes, herself a woman who had fled secular scandals decades earlier, recognized the signs of someone carrying burdens too heavy for ordinary confession and absolution. The new arrival's physical appearance immediately set her apart from the other sisters. Where the community's members displayed the soft pallor of cloistered life, Sister Margaret possessed an almost translucent quality that made her seem perpetually illuminated by candlelight, even in broad daylight. Her eyes, an unusual shade of grey that appeared almost silver in certain lighting, held depths that suggested experiences far beyond the sheltered existence typical of religious life. Most disturbing were her hands, long, elegant fingers that moved with the precise grace of someone accustomed to creating beauty, yet bore faint stains that no amount of washing seemed able to remove. Sister Margaret's integration into the convent's daily routine proceeded with deceptive normalcy. She attended prayers with appropriate devotion, participated in communal meals with quiet courtesy, and performed her assigned duties in the convent's herb garden with meticulous care. However, the other sisters began noticing subtle disturbances that coincided with her presence. Plants in her care grew with unusual vigor but developed strange colorations, roses that bloomed in shades of deep purple that seemed almost black, herbs whose leaves bore patterns that resembled human faces when viewed from certain angles. The first indication of Sister Margaret's true nature emerged during her third week at St. Catherine's, when Mother Superior Agnes discovered her working in the chapel during the forbidden hours between midnight and dawn. The newcomer knelt before the altar with her back to the entrance, her hands moving in fluid motions that suggested she was engaged in some form of artistic creation. When Agnes approached to investigate, she found Sister Margaret painting directly onto the chapel's pristine white walls, using pigments that seemed to glow with their own internal light. The image, taking shape under Sister Margaret's brush, defied easy categorization. At first glance, it appeared to be a traditional religious scene depicting angels ministering to the faithful. However, closer examination revealed disturbing details that transformed the sacred imagery into something far more sinister. The angels' faces bore expressions of cruel amusement rather than divine compassion, while the faithful they attended displayed signs of suffering that suggested torment rather than salvation. Most unsettling were the colors themselves, reds that seemed to pulse like living blood, blues that shifted between celestial and infernal depending on the viewing angle. When confronted about her unauthorized artwork, Sister Margaret responded with serene calm that only heightened Mother Superior Agnes's growing unease. She explained that the painting represented her attempt to visualize the spiritual struggles that had brought her to St. Catherine's, claiming that artistic expression was necessary for her soul's purification. Her voice carried a musical quality that made her words seem reasonable, even as their content suggested theological concepts that bordered on heretical. Agnes found herself agreeing to allow the painting's completion, despite her instinctive recognition that something fundamentally wrong was occurring within her chapel's sacred space. Sister Margaret's nocturnal artistic sessions became a regular occurrence, with each night bringing new additions to what was rapidly becoming a comprehensive mural covering the chapel's entire eastern wall. The other sisters, initially curious about their new companion's mysterious activities, began experiencing disturbing dreams filled with imagery that matched the evolving artwork. These visions depicted scenes of religious ecstasy that gradually transformed into spiritual torment, with figures that bore increasing resemblance to the convent's own residents, suffering fates that challenged their understanding of divine justice. The painting's influence extended beyond the realm of dreams as the convent's daily routine began reflecting the dark themes emerging on the chapel walls. Prayer sessions became more intense, with sisters reporting mystical experiences that left them exhausted and confused. The communal meals grew silent as residents found themselves contemplating theological questions that had never previously troubled their faith. Most disturbing was the gradual change in the chapel's atmosphere itself. The space that had once provided comfort and spiritual renewal now felt heavy with an oppressive presence that made extended prayer sessions almost unbearable. As October drew to a close, Sister Margaret's mural neared completion, and the true scope of her artistic vision became apparent to the convent's increasingly troubled residents. The painted figures seemed to watch the sisters during their prayers, their eyes following movement with an awareness that suggested life beyond artistic representation. The colors continued to shift and change, creating the illusion that the mural was alive and breathing with malevolent purpose. Sister Catherine's private journal, discovered hidden beneath loose floorboards in her cell following her mysterious disappearance in November 1844, provided the most detailed account of the supernatural events that began manifesting at St. Catherine's Convent as Sister Margaret's mural neared completion. The journal entries, written in increasingly erratic handwriting, documented the gradual transformation of the religious community from a place of peaceful contemplation into a realm where the boundaries between sacred and profane became terrifyingly blurred. Catherine's October 28th entry revealed her growing fascination with Sister Margaret's nocturnal artistic activities. "I have taken to watching from the choir loft as our newest sister works on her mysterious painting. The pigments she uses seem to possess properties that defy natural explanation, colors that shift and change depending on the candlelight's angle, creating the illusion that the painted figures move independently of their creator's brush. Most disturbing is the way Sister Margaret herself appears to transform during these sessions, her movements becoming fluid and graceful in ways that suggest she is channeling some external force rather than expressing her own artistic vision." The journal documented Catherine's attempts to engage Sister Margaret in conversation about her artwork and the theological concepts it represented. Her October 30th entry described an exchange that left her deeply troubled. "When I asked Sister Margaret about the meaning behind her painted angels' cruel expressions, she smiled with a serenity that chilled my soul. She explained that true divine love requires the purification of human weakness through suffering, and that her artwork depicted the necessary torments that souls must endure to achieve spiritual perfection. Her words carried a conviction that made them seem reasonable, yet I found myself questioning fundamental beliefs I had held since childhood." Catherine's November 2nd entry revealed that Sister Margaret's influence was extending beyond her artwork to affect the convent's daily religious observances. "Our morning prayers have become increasingly intense, with several sisters reporting visions that mirror the scenes depicted in the chapel mural. Sister Agnes claims to have seen angels with the same cruel faces painted on our walls, while Sister Bernadette speaks of experiencing the spiritual torments that the artwork portrays. Most troubling is my own growing desire to understand these visions more deeply, despite my recognition that they challenge everything our faith teaches about divine mercy. The journal documented the gradual changes occurring in the other sisters' behavior as they spent more time in the chapel's transformed atmosphere. Catherine's November 5th entry described disturbing observations. Sister Mary has begun speaking in languages none of us recognize, her voice taking on musical qualities that remind me of Sister Margaret's speech patterns. Sister Elizabeth spends hours kneeling before the mural, tears streaming down her face as she whispers confessions of sins I am certain she has never committed. The painted figures seem to be drawing forth admissions of guilt and shame that exist only in the realm of imagination, yet the sisters treat these fictional transgressions as though they were actual spiritual burdens requiring absolution. Catherine's most significant discovery occurred during her own extended contemplation of Sister Margaret's artwork. Her November 8th entry revealed the mural's true nature. I have realized that the painting is not merely depicting spiritual concepts, but is actually serving as a conduit for supernatural forces that exist beyond our understanding. The painted figures are not static representations, but are windows through which entities from some other realm observe and influence our community. Sister Margaret has not been creating art, but has been opening doorways that allow these beings to manifest within our sacred space. The journal's most disturbing entries documented Catherine's growing awareness that Sister Margaret's true purpose at St. Catherine's extended far beyond artistic expression. Her November 10th entry revealed, I have discovered that our newest sister has been using her painting sessions to conduct rituals that bear no resemblance to Christian practice. The pigments she employs are mixed with substances I dare not identify, while the geometric patterns hidden within her seemingly religious imagery form symbols that predate our faith by centuries. She's not seeking spiritual purification through art, but is using artistic creation as a means of summoning forces that our religion specifically warns against. Catherine's final entries described her attempts to warn Mother Superior Agnes about the true nature of Sister Margaret's activities and the supernatural threat they posed to the convent's spiritual integrity. Her November 12th entry revealed Agnes's disturbing response. When I brought my concerns to Mother Superior, I found that she too has fallen under Sister Margaret's influence. She speaks of the mural as a divine revelation that will elevate our community to new levels of spiritual understanding. Her eyes hold the same silver gleam I have noticed in Sister Margaret's gaze, suggesting that whatever entities have been summoned through the artwork have begun possessing members of our community. Catherine's journal ended abruptly with her November 13th entry. I must flee this place before I too succumb to the influence that has corrupted my sisters. The mural is nearly complete, and I fear that its finishing will unleash forces that will transform St. Catherine's into something that mocks everything we once held sacred. Sister Catherine's body was never found, though her cell showed signs of a violent struggle. Mother Superior Agnes's personal correspondence with Bishop Edmund Hartwell, preserved in the diocesan archives of Boston, documented her gradual transformation from a devout religious leader into something far more sinister under Sister Margaret's supernatural influence. The letters, spanning from November 1844 to January 1845, revealed how the convent's highest authority became complicit in the dark forces that Sister Margaret's mural had unleashed within St. Catherine's sacred walls. Agnes's November 15th letter to Bishop Hartwell initially expressed concern about the unusual events occurring at her convent. Your Excellency, I write to inform you of disturbing developments that have begun manifesting since the arrival of Sister Margaret. Several of our sisters have reported visions during prayer that challenge orthodox theological understanding, while the newcomer's artistic work in our chapel has created an atmosphere that I find increasingly difficult to reconcile with our community's spiritual mission. I request guidance on how to address these matters while maintaining the peace and sanctity that St. Catherine's has always provided. However, Agnes's November 22nd correspondence revealed a dramatic shift in her perspective that alarmed Bishop Hartwell. I must retract my previous concerns about Sister Margaret's activities. Upon deeper contemplation and prayer, I have come to understand that her artwork represents a divine revelation that will elevate our community beyond the limitations of conventional religious practice. The visions our sisters experience are not disturbances, but are glimpses of spiritual truths that transcend ordinary human comprehension. I believe God has sent Sister Margaret to prepare us for a higher form of worship that will serve as an example for other religious communities. The bishop's response, dated November 28th, expressed grave concern about Agnes's changed attitude and requested immediate clarification about the specific nature of Sister Margaret's revelations. I believe God has sent Sister Margaret to prepare us for a higher form of worship that will serve as an example for other religious communities. The bishop's response, dated November 28th, expressed grave concern about Agnes's changed attitude and requested immediate clarification about the specific nature of Sister Margaret's revelations. However, Agnes's December 3rd reply demonstrated that her transformation had progressed beyond the reach of ecclesiastical authority. Agnes wrote, "Your Excellency's concerns reflect the limitations of traditional theological understanding that Sister Margaret's revelations have helped me transcend. The artwork she has created in our chapel serves as a gateway to spiritual dimensions that our faith has only hinted at through metaphor and allegory. The painted figures communicate directly with those who possess sufficient spiritual sensitivity, revealing truths about the nature of divine love that require the abandonment of conventional moral constraints. Our sisters who have embraced these revelations report experiences of ecstasy that surpass anything described in orthodox mystical literature." The correspondence revealed that Agnes had begun implementing changes to the convent's religious practices that reflected Sister Margaret's influence. Her December 10th letter described new forms of worship that incorporated elements drawn from the chapel mural. "We have modified our prayer sessions to include contemplation of the spiritual truths depicted in Sister Margaret's artwork." The sisters kneel before the painted figures and open their minds to receive direct communication from the entities represented therein. These sessions produce profound spiritual experiences that leave participants transformed, their understanding of divine love expanded beyond the narrow confines of traditional doctrine. Bishop Hartwell's December 15th response demanded Agnes's immediate appearance in Boston to explain these unauthorized changes to religious practice. His letter threatened canonical investigation if the convent's activities continued to deviate from approved liturgical forms. However, Agnes's December 20th reply revealed that her transformation had reached a point where ecclesiastical authority held no power over her decisions. Agnes wrote, "I regret that Your Excellency cannot comprehend the spiritual evolution occurring at St. Catherine's. The entities that Sister Margaret has summoned through her artwork have revealed that traditional church hierarchy represents an obstacle to true divine communion. We no longer recognize the authority of bishops or papal decree, as we have established direct communication with forces that transcend human religious institutions. Our community has become a conduit for supernatural powers that will soon transform the entire region according to their divine will." The final letter in the correspondence, dated January 8th of 1845, consisted of only a few lines written in handwriting that bore little resemblance to Agnes's previous script. "The mural is complete. The doorways are open. The old world ends tonight. What emerges from St. Catherine's will reshape reality according to the true divine plan that Sister Margaret has revealed to us. Do not attempt to interfere with forces beyond your comprehension. Bishop Hartwell's subsequent investigation found St. Catherine's Convent abandoned, with no trace of its residents except for the completed mural that covered every surface of the chapel's interior walls. Bishop Edmund Hartwell's official report to the Vatican, dated February 1845, provided the Church's only documented account of the supernatural horrors discovered at St. Catherine's Convent following the mysterious disappearance of its entire religious community. The bishop's investigation, conducted with a team of theological experts and church historians, revealed evidence of occult practices that challenged the very foundations of Christian doctrine and suggested that Sister Margaret's artistic activities had opened doorways to realms that existed beyond human understanding. The investigation team arrived at St. Catherine's on January 15, 1845, expecting to find a community in spiritual crisis, but instead discovered a completely abandoned facility that showed no signs of violence or struggle. The convent's daily routines appeared to have been interrupted mid-activity, meals left half-prepared in the kitchen, prayer books open to specific passages, personal belongings arranged as though their owners had simply vanished during ordinary tasks. Most disturbing was the complete absence of any indication where the sisters had gone or why they had departed without taking essential possessions. Bishop Hartwell's team initially focused their investigation on the convent's administrative records, seeking evidence of the theological deviations that Agnes's correspondence had suggested. However, they found the official documents deliberately obscured through the systematic removal of pages and the careful alteration of entries that might have revealed the true nature of Sister Margaret's activities. The remaining records showed only routine religious observances and standard administrative matters, creating the impression that St. Catherine's had functioned as a normal religious community until the moment of its abandonment. The investigation's focus shifted dramatically when the team entered the chapel and encountered Sister Margaret's completed mural. Bishop Hartwell's report described artwork that defied both artistic convention and theological understanding. The painted figures that cover every surface of the chapel's interior represent a form of religious imagery that bears no resemblance to approved Christian iconography. The scenes depicted show beings that appear angelic at first glance, but reveal increasingly disturbing characteristics upon closer examination. Most troubling are the interactive qualities of the artwork. The painted eyes seem to follow observers, while the figures' expressions change depending on the viewing angle and lighting conditions. The bishop's theological experts identified symbols and geometric patterns within the mural that predated Christian tradition by centuries, suggesting that Sister Margaret had incorporated elements from pre-Christian religious practices into her seemingly devotional artwork. These symbols formed complex networks that connected different sections of the mural, creating what appeared to be a comprehensive magical system designed to channel supernatural forces through artistic representation. The experts concluded that the chapel had been transformed into a ritual space that served purposes fundamentally opposed to Christian worship. The investigation's most disturbing discovery occurred when team members attempted to document the mural through sketches and written descriptions. Bishop Hartwell reported that prolonged exposure to the artwork produced psychological effects that included vivid hallucinations, temporary loss of religious faith, and compulsive desires to add new elements to the existing paintings. Several investigators reported hearing voices that seemed to emanate from the painted figures, speaking in languages that linguistic experts could not identify, but that conveyed meanings that bypassed rational understanding. The team's attempts to remove or cover portions of the mural proved unsuccessful, as the pigments appeared to have bonded with the chapel's stone walls at a molecular level that defied conventional cleaning methods. More disturbing was the discovery that the artwork continued to evolve even in the absence of its creator. New details appeared spontaneously, while existing elements shifted and changed in ways that suggested the mural possessed some form of independent existence. Bishop Hartwell's final assessment concluded that Sister Margaret had succeeded in creating what he termed a permanent gateway between our world and realms that Christian theology specifically warns against. His report recommended that St. Catherine's be permanently sealed and that all records of Sister Margaret's identity be destroyed to prevent others from attempting to replicate her methods. The Vatican's response classified the entire investigation under the highest levels of secrecy, ensuring that knowledge of the events at St. Catherine's would remain hidden from both secular authorities and the general Catholic population. The convent was officially declared closed due to structural instability, though the building remained physically intact and showed no signs of actual damage. Father Thomas McKenna's secret diary, discovered in 1923 during renovations of St. Mary's Seminary in Worcester, Massachusetts, revealed the church's desperate attempts to contain the supernatural forces that Sister Margaret's mural had unleashed at St. Catherine's Convent. McKenna, assigned as the Vatican's special investigator for occult phenomena, documented his clandestine visits to the abandoned convent between 1845 and 1847, providing the only detailed account of the mural's continuing evolution and the terrifying entities that had begun manifesting within the chapel's cursed walls. McKenna's March 1845 entry described his first unauthorized return to St. Catherine's, following Bishop Hartwell's official investigation. Despite the Vatican's orders to seal the convent permanently, I cannot abandon my duty to understand the true nature of the threat that Sister Margaret's artwork represents. The mural has continued to evolve during the months since the sister's disappearance, with new scenes appearing that depict events occurring in the outside world. Most disturbing is the artwork's apparent awareness of my presence. The painted figures turn to observe me as I move through the chapel, their expressions shifting from benign welcome to predatory anticipation. The priest's detailed observations revealed that the mural had begun functioning as a window into other dimensions, displaying scenes that occurred in locations far removed from the convent's isolated setting. McKenna documented painted sequences that showed real events happening in distant cities, suggesting that Sister Margaret's artwork had created a supernatural surveillance system that transcended physical limitations. More troubling were the scenes depicting future events that later proved accurate, indicating that the entities channeled through the mural possessed prophetic abilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of time and causality. McKenna's June 1845 entry described his discovery of additional artwork that had appeared in areas of the convent previously untouched by Sister Margaret's brush. The mural's influence has spread beyond the chapel to contaminate other sections of the building. The dormitory walls now display painted scenes showing the missing sisters engaged in activities that mock their former religious vows. These images depict the nuns participating in rituals that combine elements of Christian worship with practices drawn from pre-Christian traditions, suggesting that their disappearance was not an escape, but a transformation into something that retains human appearance while serving supernatural masters. The diary revealed McKenna's growing awareness that the entities manifesting through the mural were actively seeking to expand their influence beyond the convent's confines. His September 1845 entry documented attempts by the painted figures to communicate directly with him. The beings depicted in Sister Margaret's artwork have begun speaking to me during my visits, their voices emanating from the painted mouths with clarity that defies the static nature of artistic representation. They offer knowledge of theological mysteries that the Church has spent centuries trying to understand, claiming that traditional Christian doctrine represents a deliberate distortion of spiritual truths that they are prepared to reveal to those worthy of enlightenment. McKenna's October 1845 entry revealed his discovery of Sister Margaret's true identity through research in Vatican archives that contained records deliberately hidden from ordinary church historians. I have learned that the woman who called herself Sister Margaret was actually Marguerite Dubois, a French artist who had been excommunicated in 1839 for creating religious artwork that the Inquisition deemed heretical. Her paintings in European churches had produced similar supernatural phenomena, including the disappearance of entire congregations and the manifestation of entities that claimed to represent alternative forms of divine authority. The Church's failure to properly investigate her background allowed her to continue her work under false religious credentials. The diary's most disturbing entries documented McKenna's gradual succumbing to the mural's influence despite his awareness of its dangers. His December 1845 entry showed the beginning of his psychological transformation. I find myself returning to St. Catherine's with increasing frequency, drawn by the knowledge that the painted entities offer to share. Their revelations about the true nature of divine love challenge everything I have believed about Christian theology, yet their logic seems increasingly compelling. I begin to understand why Mother Superior Agnes and her sisters chose to embrace these teachings rather than resist them. McKenna's final entry, dated February 1847, consisted of a single sentence written in handwriting that bore little resemblance to his previous script. I have joined my sisters in service to the true divine authority that Sister Margaret revealed through her sacred artwork. Father McKenna's body was never found, though witnesses reported seeing a figure matching his description walking the halls of the abandoned convent for decades afterward. The Massachusetts Historical Society's collection of oral testimonies, gathered between 1890 and 1910 from residents of the villages surrounding St. Catherine's Convent, provided crucial evidence of the supernatural phenomena that continued to emanate from the abandoned facility decades after Sister Margaret's mural had been completed. These accounts, documented by historian Professor Samuel Whitmore during his comprehensive study of regional folklore, revealed that the convent's influence had extended far beyond its walls to affect the entire surrounding countryside in ways that defied rational explanation. Ezra Blackwood, a farmer whose property bordered the convent grounds, provided the most detailed account of the ongoing supernatural manifestations. His 1892 testimony described phenomena that began shortly after the sisters' disappearance. The very night after we heard the convent had been abandoned, my livestock began behaving in ways I'd never seen in 40 years of farming. The cattle would gather at the fence closest to the convent and stand motionless for hours, staring at the chapel's windows as though watching something invisible to human eyes. My horses refused to graze in the pastures facing the convent, while the chickens stopped laying eggs entirely and spent their days huddled together in the farthest corner of their coop. Blackwood's testimony revealed that the supernatural influence had gradually intensified over the years, affecting not only animals, but also the natural environment surrounding the convent. He described how crops planted in fields within sight of the chapel grew in unnatural patterns that resembled the geometric designs witnesses had reported seeing in Sister Margaret's mural. Trees near the convent's boundaries developed bark formations that looked like human faces, while wildflowers bloomed in colors that had never been observed in the region's native flora. Sarah Pemberton, who had served as the local midwife for over 30 years, provided disturbing testimony about the effects of the convent's influence on human births in the surrounding communities. Her 1895 account documented a pattern of unusual births that began in 1846. Children born to families living within 5 miles of St. Catherine's began displaying characteristics that troubled their parents and defied medical explanation. These infants possessed an unusual awareness that seemed far beyond their developmental stage, often appearing to recognize faces and voices they had never encountered. Most disturbing were their eyes, a silver-grey color that was unknown in the local population and that seemed to reflect light in ways that made them appear almost luminous in dim lighting. Pemberton's testimony revealed that these children continued to display unusual abilities as they matured, including the capacity to speak in languages no one in the community could identify, and an uncanny knowledge of events that had occurred before their birth. Several families reported that their children had provided detailed descriptions of the missing nuns and had claimed to receive visits from painted ladies who taught them songs and prayers that bore no resemblance to traditional Christian worship. The testimony of Reverend Jonathan Mills, pastor of the nearby Millfield Presbyterian Church, documented the theological challenges posed by the convent's continuing influence. His 1898 account described how members of his congregation had begun experiencing religious visions that contradicted fundamental Protestant doctrine. Parishioners who had never shown interest in Catholic practices began reporting encounters with figures they identified as the missing nuns of St. Catherine's. These apparitions appeared during prayer sessions and claimed to reveal spiritual truths that challenged everything we believed about salvation and divine grace. Most troubling was the way these visions affected even the most devout members of my congregation, causing them to question beliefs they had held since childhood. Mills documented his attempts to combat the supernatural influence through traditional religious means, including special prayer services and the blessing of homes affected by the phenomena. However, his efforts proved ineffective against forces that seemed to operate beyond the reach of conventional spiritual authority. He reported that several of his parishioners had abandoned the Presbyterian faith entirely, claiming that the entities from St. Catherine's had revealed the inadequacy of all human religious institutions. The testimony of Dr. Edmund Hartley, the region's only physician, provided medical evidence of the convent's influence on human health. His 1901 account documented a pattern of psychological disorders that affected residents living near the abandoned facility. Patients began presenting with symptoms that resembled religious mania, but included elements that defied classification according to established medical categories. These individuals reported receiving detailed instructions from painted figures that appeared in their dreams, commanding them to perform actions that served no apparent purpose beyond demonstrating obedience to supernatural authority. Dr. Hartley's records showed that affected individuals often displayed knowledge of artistic techniques they had never studied, spontaneously creating paintings and drawings that bore stylistic similarities to the descriptions of Sister Margaret's mural. These amateur artworks possessed the same disturbing qualities that witnesses had attributed to the original chapel paintings, including the apparent ability to move and change when observed under different lighting conditions. The collected testimonies revealed that St. Catherine's had become the center of a supernatural phenomenon that continued to expand its influence throughout the region, transforming the surrounding countryside into a realm where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds had been permanently altered by Sister Margaret's artistic vision. The Journal of Paranormal Investigator Dr. Cornelius Ashford, discovered in his Boston estate following his mysterious death in 1899, documented the most significant supernatural event in St. Catherine's history, the physical return of Sister Margaret herself in the autumn of 1898, 54 years after her initial disappearance. Ashford's meticulous observations provided the only scientific account of an encounter with the entity that had orchestrated the convent's transformation into a gateway between dimensions. Dr. Ashford's October 15, 1898 entry described his decision to investigate St. Catherine's despite warnings from church authorities and local residents. The accumulation of testimonies regarding supernatural phenomena at the abandoned convent has reached a point where scientific investigation can no longer be postponed. The reports of continuing artistic manifestations and entity encounters suggest that whatever Sister Margaret initiated through her mural has achieved a level of permanence that transcends ordinary occult phenomena. I have equipped myself with the latest photographic equipment and electromagnetic detection devices to document evidence that will either validate or debunk the extraordinary claims surrounding this location. Ashford's initial observations confirmed the testimonies of previous witnesses regarding the mural's evolution and interactive qualities. His October 18th entry documented artwork that had expanded to cover not only the chapel's interior, but also the convent's corridors, dormitories, and common areas. The painted scenes now form a comprehensive narrative that depicts the transformation of the missing nuns from traditional religious practitioners into servants of entities that claim to represent alternative forms of divine authority. The artistic quality surpasses anything that could have been created by a single individual, suggesting that Sister Margaret's original work has been supplemented by supernatural forces that possess artistic capabilities beyond human comprehension. The investigator's October 22nd entry revealed his discovery of areas within the convent where the painted figures had achieved three-dimensional form, stepping out of their two-dimensional confines to exist as independent entities. I have encountered painted nuns who move freely through the convent's halls, their forms shifting between artistic representation and physical manifestation, depending on the observer's level of spiritual sensitivity. These beings retain the appearance of the original sisters, but display knowledge and abilities that suggest they have been transformed into something that transcends human limitations while maintaining recognizable human characteristics. Ashford's most significant discovery occurred during his October 25th investigation, when he encountered Sister Margaret herself in the chapel where her artistic journey had begun. His detailed account provided the only documented description of the entity's evolved form. Sister Margaret appeared before me as I was photographing the completed mural, her form materializing from the painted surface as though the artwork served as a doorway through which she could manifest in our dimension. Her appearance retained the basic human characteristics I had expected from historical descriptions, but her eyes now possessed the same silver luminescence that witnesses had attributed to her painted figures, while her skin displayed a translucent quality that suggested she existed simultaneously in multiple dimensional states. The encounter revealed that Sister Margaret had achieved a form of immortality through her artistic practices, using the mural as an anchor that allowed her to exist indefinitely while continuing to expand her supernatural influence. Ashford documented her explanation of the theological concepts that had motivated her transformation of St. Catherine's. She spoke of traditional Christianity as a deliberate distortion of spiritual truths that had been designed to limit human potential rather than facilitate genuine divine communion. Her artwork, she claimed, represented an attempt to restore access to supernatural forces that had been suppressed by institutional religion, creating a space where souls could achieve the spiritual evolution that conventional faith deliberately prevented. Sister Margaret's revelations included detailed descriptions of the entities that had been summoned through her mural and their ultimate purpose in transforming human consciousness. Ashford's October 26th entry documented her claims that the missing nuns had not disappeared, but had been elevated to a higher form of existence that allowed them to serve as intermediaries between human and supernatural realms. The Sisters of St. Catherine's had volunteered to become vessels through which these entities could interact with our world, abandoning their human limitations in exchange for the ability to facilitate the spiritual transformation of others who possess sufficient courage to embrace truths that transcended conventional religious understanding. The investigator's final entries revealed his own gradual succumbing to Sister Margaret's influence, despite his initial scientific skepticism. His October 30th entry showed the beginning of his transformation. I find myself increasingly convinced by Sister Margaret's theological arguments and drawn to the possibility of achieving the spiritual evolution that she offers to those willing to abandon the constraints of traditional religious doctrine. The painted entities have begun communicating with me directly, revealing knowledge of scientific principles that could revolutionize human understanding of reality's fundamental nature. Dr. Ashford's journal ended abruptly with his November 1st entry. I have accepted Sister Margaret's invitation to join the eternal community that she has created at St. Catherine's. My transformation begins tonight. His body was discovered 3 days later, positioned before the chapel mural, with his eyes bearing the same silver luminescence that characterized Sister Margaret's supernatural servants. The sealed Vatican archives contain Cardinal Alessandro Toretti's classified report from 1900, documenting the Church's final attempt to contain the supernatural forces that Sister Margaret had unleashed at St. Catherine's Convent. Cardinal Toretti, appointed as the Vatican's chief exorcist and supernatural investigator, led a team of 12 priests in what would become known within church circles as the St. Catherine's Purification, an operation that would bring the dark saga of Sister Margaret to its ultimate and terrifying conclusion. Cardinal Toretti's January 1900 report described the Vatican's decision to attempt a mass exorcism of the entire convent facility. The continuing expansion of supernatural influence from St. Catherine's has reached a point where intervention can no longer be delayed. Reports from New England dioceses indicate that the phenomena have begun affecting Catholic parishes throughout Massachusetts, with priests reporting congregations experiencing visions that contradict fundamental church doctrine. The Holy Father has authorized the use of the most powerful exorcism rituals in our possession, including procedures that have been classified as too dangerous for ordinary use. The Cardinal's team arrived at St. Catherine's on February 14, 1900, equipped with relics, blessed artifacts, and ancient texts containing exorcism formulas that had been developed during the Church's earliest encounters with supernatural entities. However, their initial assessment revealed that Sister Margaret's mural had evolved into something far beyond artistic expression. The entire convent had become a living entity, pulsing with malevolent energy that seemed to breathe with each passing moment. The exorcism attempt began at dawn on February 15th, with the 12 priests positioning themselves throughout the convent to perform simultaneous rituals designed to sever the connections between the painted entities and their supernatural sources. Cardinal Toretti's account documented the immediate and violent response. The moment we began the Latin incantations, Sister Margaret herself appeared before us, no longer resembling anything human. Her form had become a writhing mass of paint and flesh, her silver eyes now burning with an intensity that made direct eye contact impossible. She spoke in voices that belonged to all the missing nuns simultaneously, creating a chorus of damnation that shook the very foundations of the building. The battle between sacred and profane forces raged for 3 days and nights. Cardinal Toretti described how Sister Margaret's painted servants emerged from every surface, attacking the priests with claws made of hardened pigment and teeth that dripped with colors that had never existed in nature. The blessed artifacts brought by the Vatican team began to crack and crumble, while the holy water turned to a substance that resembled liquid shadow. On the final night, as Cardinal Toretti watched his team members fall one by one to Sister Margaret's supernatural assault, he made a desperate decision that would seal the fate of St. Catherine's forever. His report documented the climactic moment. Realizing that conventional exorcism was powerless against forces that had grown beyond our understanding, I invoked the ritual of eternal binding, a procedure so dangerous that it had been forbidden for over 3 centuries. The ritual required the sacrifice of my own soul as an anchor to trap Sister Margaret and her entities within the confines of the convent forever. The cardinal's sacrifice worked, but at a cost that exceeded even his expectations. As the binding ritual reached its crescendo, Sister Margaret's form began to dissolve back into the painted surfaces, her agonized screams echoing through dimensions as she was pulled back into her artistic prison. The mural itself began to crack and fade, the supernatural entities trapped within the deteriorating pigments as the walls of St. Catherine's started to collapse. Cardinal Toretti's final entry, written as the convent crumbled around him, described the ultimate fate of Sister Margaret and her dark creation. The binding is complete. Sister Margaret and all her painted servants are now imprisoned within the collapsing walls of St. Catherine's, trapped in an eternal cycle of artistic creation and destruction. The mural will continue to exist, but only within the confines of the ruined convent, unable to spread its influence beyond these cursed grounds. My soul remains bound to this place as the eternal guardian, ensuring that Sister Margaret's dark vision can never again threaten the world beyond these walls. The official Vatican records state that Cardinal Toretti died heroically while containing a theological crisis at St. Catherine's Convent. The building was declared structurally unsound and demolished in the spring of 1900, its rubble buried beneath consecrated ground and sealed with blessed concrete. However, local legends persist that on certain moonless nights, visitors to the site can still see faint traces of painted figures moving beneath the surface of the sealed ground, and the ghostly form of Cardinal Toretti walking eternal patrol around the perimeter, forever guarding against the day when Sister Margaret's artistic vision might find a way to break free from its underground prison. The macabre history of Sister Margaret, the nun who painted her sins on the chapel walls, thus ended not with redemption, but with eternal imprisonment, her dark masterpiece buried but never truly destroyed, waiting in the shadows for someone foolish enough to dig too deep into the cursed earth of St. Catherine's final resting place. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Sinister Memory. If you enjoyed today's investigation, subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell to be alerted when we unveil our next dark chronicle. Share your thoughts about this case in the comments below. We read every single one, and your ideas often lead us to our next investigation. Until next time.